all with the understanding. I usually have a science disclosure saying you understand, disclaimer saying that you understand I'm not a medical practitioner based in the US. Having said that, most of what I've learned about the human brain and the human mind and the human body has come outside of clinical training and clinical practice. Surprise, surprise, right? I actually went on a 10-year, I would say 10-year hiatus. I traveled around extensively in the US for about 10 years and just learning and just soaking in some of the best practices and the best discoveries. Most of them obviously natural, things that we could take and use and apply in third world countries, countries where there are low resource, very little access to hospitals. Just a quick example, over 70% of all deliveries are done outside the hospital. So in churches and mosques at home. So you can imagine there's a lot of risk. There's a high likelihood for something going wrong, and a lot does go wrong. So we started a foundation to address, first of all, kids with cerebral palsy, brain disorders, seizure disorders, and so on and so forth. After a period of time, we began to find out, or people began to find out about us, and people with adults with strokes and dementia started approaching us. Obviously, we did all of this under the supervision of the government. Everything we found out and we discovered. And again, it was an iterative process. As we would learn, we would try this approach. We would see the results. We would document it, take it to the government, ask for the permission to use it in this particular group of people. And everything we did was nutraceuticals and nutrient supplements. We never used anything medical, any drugs at all, because I mean, you're basically inviting disaster if you want to start using the medications, brain medications, in rural areas where there aren't enough medical support to kind of take care of complications just in case they happen. So we had to learn how to use the most basic tools, which were nutrients. And we learned a lot there. I'm going to share my slides in a minute. We learned a lot from this process, because one of the things we learned more than anything is that the human body and the human brain has the ability to heal itself if given the right tools. And we started doing that. Like I said, we started a foundation that would work with kids first, and then eventually we obviously kind of included adults. We didn't switch, but we included adults as well with dementias. And in the process too, we started working with sickle cell disease. Now, sickle cell disease, most of you who are white or Caucasian may not know much about it, but sickle cell disease is a killer. In Nigeria has the most number of Black people on the planet. So sickle cell disease is primarily a Black person's problem. And most kids die by the age of 5. And we're talking about over 100,000 each year. And so to me, it was just unacceptable. So when they started coming to us with strokes, that's a big complication with sickle cell disease. They started coming to us with strokes, and we started looking into it. And we found out that if we applied first principles, that's a term Elon Musk has made very famous now, but we've been thinking in that way for everything we do. When we started thinking, what are the basic fundamental problems here? Yes, it is a genetic problem. Yes, it is a blood disorder. But how does that manifest? What are the different ways in which it manifests? And so we basically did a lot of research and then thinking, studying, and eventually found out that simple things like strengthening the immune system could go a long way. So we started doing that, and I started teaching other people to do it. And eventually we had, I hope, okay, let's see, I think I need to make this full screen. Okay, that's full screen now, great. Yeah, so this is, we started getting kids in the early 20s started hearing about us. So and then they came to start volunteering. And these are some of them here, some of our staff as well, but most of them are in their mid-20s. And they just, we taught them how to basically use these nutrients, obviously give them strict parameters to use. And they started seeing amazing results. So we started having free clinics all over the country, and just teaching these kids what they need to do to help these other kids. And lo and behold, they're seeing some amazing results. Most kids with sickle cell disease have crises. They're once a week, once a month. They are unable to go to work. They're unable to go to school. They're unable to do anything. They just suffer throughout their lives until they get to the age of 5. They die. If they're lucky enough or unlucky, they live past 5. But most of them will die by the age of 30. The ones who survive past the age of 5, and I'm talking about 50 to 75% die by that age. Now we are changing that, and we're seeing that and we're taking this to the government for help. To ask them to change their policy towards treating sickle cell disease, because right now, clearly it's inadequate, and we have found out solutions, basic solutions. I'm talking about things like simple as vitamin D, vitamin C, and zinc. These are the 3 things you've probably heard about, especially during COVID-19. So I'm saying all that to say that we can't lose sight of the first principles. We can't lose sight of the basic fundamentals, even if it comes to something as complex as dementia. We'll be talking about dementia's dirty dozen, but there are still basic fundamental things that govern everything. Everything. It doesn't matter how big it is or how complex it is. There are basic facts, and I fear that in the Western world and in the U.S. in particular, where we seem to be going to the highfalutin, the complex, the technologically advanced, and that's fine as long as you take the basics along with it, because the basics are always important, whatever you're doing, whether it's removing a brain tumor or whether it's changing a sex, if that's possible, or whatever you're doing, the fundamentals are absolutely vital. So here's a quick outline. I just told you about my introduction, about backgrounds. We'll be talking about dementia, and then we'll be also talking about Alzheimer's disease. Dementia's dirty dozen, I came up with it for my work with the Alzheimer's Association. I volunteer with the Alzheimer's Association. And especially, I approached them because I said, the Black people, dark-skinned people like me, we have a much higher risk of having dementia. And I don't see much being spoken about with regards to that. First of all, why are we having such higher risks, higher rates of dementia? What can be done about it? Why don't you identify these things? And so it's also become a personal interest and passion of mine to address this. Because as countries like Nigeria, and Dr. Bill was mentioning, Kenya, Nigeria, 50 is advanced age. The average lifespan is 53 in Nigeria. It's probably higher in Kenya. But it's with improved access to medical care, that number is rising to 60s and 70s. And if nothing is done, we're going to be seeing a huge number of dementia, huge rates of dementia in those countries, and we just don't have the infrastructure to take care of that. So we need to again focus on the fundamentals. I have a picture of Bob Hope here, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But as you know, he used to travel around the world to the troops, and once in a while he would have this beautiful young lady, scantily clad, walk her up and down the stage, have her do a few pivot turns, a few poses, and he says, Take a good look, boys. Just remember, this is what you're fighting for. And of course, the young kids, 17, 18-year-old soldiers would scream. They'll be so excited, testosterone oozing out of every pore. Of course, it was a joke. They were fighting for their nation. But when it comes to dementia, I feel it's really important that we understand what we are fighting to avoid. You cannot take a passive approach towards dementia. There are so many, especially, I like to talk to younger people about this too. From your 40s, if not before then, from your 40s, you got to start thinking about your brain. All the stuff you were doing as a kid, it's over. It's over. You got to start focusing on understanding what it takes to protect your brain. So on the left side, you see a healthy brain. Obviously, on the right side, you see a diseased Alzheimer's ridden brain. Over 30% of the brain would have shrunk by the time you have Alzheimer's disease and at the time of death. In old age, with age, it's about 10% of the brain eventually shrinks when you get into your 80s and your 90s. But in Alzheimer's disease, obviously, it's a lot more. That is a lot. 30% is a lot of brain tissue, folks. That is a lot. And you can see why the brain tries to compensate. it tries to overcome. And we'll talk about it a little bit more, but it just, by the time you lose that much brain tissue, it's a big problem. I just want to put up this information. The Alzheimer's Association is doing a great work. So you can, I mean, they're not perfect, but you can call them. They have a 24-hour hotline. You can call them ask them about anything, whether it's for legal aid or whether it's for supports or just directions on tools and materials. And they have volunteers who speak all over the country to educate groups around the country on dementia. So please take advantage. That's the phone number and that's the website address. I want to point out that it's not just about memory loss, it's brain failure. And I really hate it when you have these memory care facilities because you can have dementia and not have memory loss. It's more than that. It's, like I said, brain failure, everything from thinking to processing speed, to ability to recognize objects, to even physical effects by way of balance, sleep problems, and so on and so forth. Yes, memory is what most people focus on, but it's not just about memory. Here's a picture here that shows that. Remember, dementia is a whole conglomeration of different types, but Alzheimer's disease is the most common, so we're going to be focused on that for the most part. Let's talk about definitions a little bit. I think it's very important. The clearer you are about what a thing is, the more you would be, in my opinion, you'd be more prone to address or to avoid the thing. But if it's vague, if it's just this spooky, nebulous thing that just jumps on you, or that you never know whether it's going to affect you or not, it leaves you powerless, in my opinion. But if you're clear about what a thing is, I think it's much more helpful. So the definition we've had of dementia and Alzheimer's disease has, in my opinion, been disempowering. So it's basically a problem of the disease of the brain that is characterized by proteins, the amyloid plaques and the tau tangles that appear on the brain, and eventually they choke out the neurons, the brain cells, and the synapses, and eventually the individual dies from the spread of the proteins and the tau tangles, and so on and so forth. And so how do those proteins appear? How do we stop them from appearing? Leave it to us, the experts say. The experts say, leave it to us. We're working on it. We're going to come up with a drug, and eventually the drug is going to take away the tau tangles and the amyloid plaques, and then you'll be okay. But it's going to take a while. It's going to take billions and billions and billions of dollars. When we're ready, when we've gotten the right drug, it's going to work and everybody is going to be happy. Well, the problem is, there's a lot of problem with that, in my opinion. First of all, we in Africa can't wait that long. And also, it's very expensive. And another thing, it's not all about the amyloid plaques. So let's look at the new paradigm. And again, this is from this is the best definition I found. Alzheimer's is a degenerative brain disease that is caused by complex brain changes following cell damage. It leads to dementia symptoms that gradually worsen over time. Now, this is a little more clarifying. One, we know, let's see the next picture now. Let's see. One, we know that damage to the cells has something to do with it. Number two, we know that the brain is trying to compensate or trying to deal with this damage. Number three, sometimes it fails at doing that. And so there's degeneration and gradual destruction, which results in symptoms that are progressive or that are worsening. So today, the person may not just remember 2 days ago. Tomorrow, he may not be able to find his way home from the office. Other times, he may not be able to balance his checkbook or not recognize his spouse, and so on and so forth. So it's progressive. Unfortunately, the average from diagnosis to death is about 10 years. And in between that, in that ensuing period, there's a lot of pain and heartache for the individual and for the members of the family. I just want to quickly mention here that neurons are not the only cells that are damaged. Neurons only make up about 10% of all the cells in the brain, believe it or not. And over 50% of the neurons are in the cerebellum, by the way. The cerebellum is the part of the body, of the brain, that is associated with balance and a few other things. But they're not the only problem. So let's look at really what happens. I'm not going to read this all, but when I started studying this, I was like, wow, there's so much going on in the brain in a person with Alzheimer's dementia. Why are we just focused on the plaques? We're seeing all kinds of problems. Glucose metabolism, there's oxidative stress, there are problems with vitamin B1, there are problems with acetylcholine, calcium problems, and just a whole bunch of stuff. Just reminds me of I don't know if this applies, but the Endgame scene, in Endgame, the Avengers movie, where there's wanton total destruction. I mean, this is kind of like what it reminds me of. And unfortunately, again, we're not looking at all these things. Also, this movie, it also reminds me of this movie that won a few Oscars, Everything. I don't think it deserved those Oscars. That's beside the point. I don't think it deserved all the Oscars, but it was an interesting title. And the title of the movie says, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. And that's really what I see with the brain. There's a lot of things happening, a lot of things going on. And if we're able to pause and that's really what's happening in many research centers. So in the bid to address dementia, they are looking at individual things. So I understand concerning thiamine, which is vitamin B1, there was a $40 million grant given just to research vitamin B1 and dementia. So a lot of things going on. So let's get on to what's causing the damage. So we've talked about that there's damage, there's cellular change, there's what do you call it now, complex brain changes, and so on and so forth. But what is causing the damage? Because if we understand what's causing the damage, then we'll be able to be more prone or more apt to understand how to prevent the damage. And if the damage does occur, we should be more apt to fix the damage as quickly as possible, rather than let it stay and fester. But if all we think about is the plaques appearing and eventually the plaques are going to kill us, and then again, it leaves us disempowered. So it's important for us to understand what is causing the damage. And in my opinion, before damage can occur, there must be attacks. So attacks first, then damage, then complex brain changes. So we are setting the stage for the dementia's dirty dozen. And I came up with this again after research, after I do several speeches in senior centers. I interact with seniors a lot. It's great to hear back, because it's one thing to give out information. It's another thing to find out how that information is landing. And many times we assume that we're saying one thing, meanwhile the person receiving it might be hearing something entirely different. So I've learned a lot from working with the Alzheimer's Association and with the Baltimore Health Department of Aging. And so again, the feedback has been instrumental in my coming up with this dementia's dirty dozen. And as you can see, they all start with the letter I. I try to finagle a few things to make sure they fit in the letter I, but let's get on with it. So number one is illnesses. You probably have heard about cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and diabetes, especially prolonged hypertension or uncontrolled hypertension. Prolonged diabetes can both cause damage to the brain over a period of time. We're now beginning to understand exactly how. With hypertension, we're seeing that it's not just damage to the blood vessels in the brain, but also there's damage to the blood-brain barrier and the leakage of certain proteins that trigger a complex chain of reactions that eventually can cause dementia. Diabetes, obviously, high blood sugar is a problem. and high blood sugar has all kinds of damage effects. It mainly affects the hippocampus, which is the memory center, the memory processing center. It seems like the hippocampus is affected a lot. One reason for that is that it's a very highly metabolic part of the brain. It's also very, very, very sensitive to chemical changes. Obviously, sugar is a chemical change. I'm going to just breeze through these because there are about 12 of them. I want to be careful not to go over time. So there you have it. So I mentioned cardiovascular disease. Obviously, psychiatric mental health conditions, prolonged depression can be damaging to the brain. There's a quote that says, depression, first of all, maims the mind, then it kills the body. Depression maims the mind and kills the body. Another quote says that the opposite of not depression, the opposite of depression is not happiness. The opposite of depression is vitality, because depression sucks out the life force, the energy, the things that make life worth living. Neurological conditions. Okay, we now are beginning to find out that hearing loss, untreated hearing loss, can lead to dementia. Here's another thing you probably haven't heard of. Untreated loss of smell. They're now associating that with progression to dementia. As a matter of fact, COVID-19, they're seeing a lot more cases with dementia after this pandemic. The president said the pandemic is over. So after this pandemic, we're beginning to see a lot more cases of people who had loss of smell. They're now connecting that. They're now seeing that progress more rapidly to dementia. So we are in a lot of trouble, I tell you folks. Whew, a lot of things going on. All right, injury. That's pretty straightforward. If there's damage to the brain from whether it's a blunt injury, direct impacts, or blast injuries, which is what happens, especially when you're in the military and serving in the battlefront, you're hearing these blast injuries, believe it or not, can cause injury and eventually dementia. The other things that make soldiers more prone to dementia, I'm probably getting to that. Soldiers, I meant veterans. So the other thing, insults. So we've talked about illness, injury, and insults. Toxins. We are in high-tech world. A lot of things going on, from everything from our phones to microwaves to TVs to computers and so on. We are bombarded by all kinds of toxic radiation and toxic fumes and so on and so forth. Obviously, drinking can cause a problem with dementia. Teeth fillings. I'm hoping they were trying to stop the mercury filling, using mercury fillings. I hope they'll be successful at that. Another thing is imbalances. One of the top things that we found out, and there could be all kinds of things. Dr. Bill mentioned that he got the link for my book. It has a lot to do with the hormones. One of the reasons they are saying women have twice as high a risk as men from having dementia is that drop in estrogen. The estrogen levels, also progesterone levels are drop as well. But we find out that estrogen is probably the most important hormone for the brain. It has a slew of protective influences on the neurons and the synapses. So once the levels of estrogen begin to drop, you see the effects. And some of you ladies may have experienced it during menopause. But that's one of the things. There are also balance between copper and zinc. That's a balance that needs to be preserved. Glutathione and mercury, the balance between omega-3s and omega-6s. Again, those balances are way off in our diets. We have much more of omega-6, which is inflammatory, as opposed to omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatories. So one of the things that we do with our foundation is address that imbalance and find ways to help the body make more of the nutrients it is lacking And the body knows how to, for the most part, the body knows how to put that balance back in place. So if you, rather than giving the finished product, we give the raw materials to the brain, so the brain can put the balance back in place. Also, there's the imbalances between the excitatory neurotransmitters and the inhibitory or the non-excitatory neurotransmitters. You've probably heard that dementia is also called type 3, diabetes type 3. And I don't like that term, because when you when people hear about type 3 diabetes, they think only about sugar. But what we're finding out is that insulin resistance is not just about the inability to control or to modulate or to keep sugar levels low. We're finding out that insulin, the hormone, is vital for the protection of the synapses and also in the regulation of energy in the brain. So once a person is insulin resistant, he is not only resistant to the influence of insulin on blood sugar, but is also resistant to all the other beneficial effects of insulin on the brain. And you can check that yourself. You can do some more research on that. But it is fascinating what insulin does with the brain. So that's one thing. And some researchers are actually using insulin as a treatment, intranasal insulin as a treatment for dementia. Another one is intestinal dysfunction or indigestion. We all have major problems with indigestion. The numbers are staggering. And so you go to the doctor, they give you a pill for heartburn, they give you antacids, they give you drugs for constipation. Well, we're finding out that the use of things as simple as acid reflux medications are linked to a higher risk of dementia. Amongst the things that it does is that artificially reducing your stomach acid, which is already low in older people, is a big problem, because it affects the absorption of certain vital nutrients. I mean, this is just one example. Certain vital nutrients like vitamin B12. Low vitamin B12 is also linked to dementia as well. So you want to find someone who can help you restore digestive health as a whole, rather than just addressing one aspect of it. Infections. Again, I mentioned COVID-19 being related to dementia. We also seen that there are other viruses too that are related to dementia. The brain is not as sterile as we used to think. We're now beginning to see the microbiome of the brain, the whole slew of different bugs and viruses in the brain that affect the brain and that can be very toxic to the brain given the right or the wrong circumstances. The unspecified virus of an unknown origin. I had to giggle. I chuckled at this when I heard this someone say it, because our TV show, it was we talked about some of the natural things to do to help boost your immune system and to avoid at least to protect against COVID-19. And YouTube gave us a strike. And remember, there are 3 strikes against you. They gave us a strike just because we're talking about alternatives. Can you imagine that? Alternatives that you could use. And in Nigeria, we didn't have access to the remdesivir or the vaccines at that time. We didn't have any of those things. So we're talking about what we can do based on what is available. And yet YouTube attacked us. Can you imagine that? All right, tooth infections are a big thing. We're now finding out that, and probably you already know this as well. I mean, if you have gum disease, tooth infection, if your teeth bleed easily, there are certain bacteria in the tooth that can easily get into the bloodstream, get to the brain, and cause inflammation in the brain, and can eventually, with inflammation, persistent inflammation in the brain, can lead to dementia. That's one of the pathways to damage. All right, so far we've been talking about the things that damage, the causes of damage to the brain or the attacks to the brain. We're going to switch lanes a bit. I hope that's the right expression. We're going to switch lanes a bit, and we're going to talk about the things that need to be done, or the things the things that protect your brain, that if are not available or if they are not in place, can lead to damage. And there are about 4 of them. First of all is inactivity. This is probably one of the most researched aspects. Physical exercise, especially strength training. More important for those of us over 50. Earlier than that, aerobic training, yes, but physical strength training, the building of muscle. I'm not talking about the Arnold Schwarzenegger type of muscle, but you need to be strong. And many of these high-end retirement centers, retirement homes, they are now bringing in professional trainers to work with the seniors and the elderly people there to strengthen their muscles, strengthen their ability to balance their balance. So that's because they now know that just physical strength translates to mental resilience and mental strength and protection from Alzheimer's disease. So that's really, really important. Also, inactivity applies also to mental inactivity. We know that people will stay active, who are learning new things, who are maybe traveling, who's having their brains constantly challenged and stimulated by knowledge or information, or who are reading, who are, you know what I'm talking about, playing Scrabble or bingo or whatever. They're the ones who seem to have greater protection. And I think it comes from the building of synapses and the network connections. We're going to get into that a bit more. But activity is super important. So you have a few older ladies exercising. All right, next one. Insufficiencies, inadequacies. Yeah, I probably should have used the word deficiency, but that will mess my list up. That's not an I. It has to start with an I. So insufficiencies is going to have to work, or inadequacies. And by this, I'm referring mainly to nutrients deficiencies. But it's more than just nutrient deficiencies. For instance, now, obviously the brain needs a lot of oxygen. The brain needs a lot of energy. Over 20% of the blood flow goes to the brain first, after the heart. So priority is to the brain. 20% of the oxygen, 20% of the nutrients and the energy supply goes to the brain. So as you know, the brain is super, it really needs a lot of nutrients. Oxygen is important. Water is important. The brain has, I think it's over 80% of the brain is made up of water. So simple things like dehydration, simple things like, again, depression. You're not taking enough oxygen, so you're not filling your lungs enough. Your brain isn't getting enough oxygen. That's why hyperbaric oxygen chambers work so well. But the ones that really I emphasize, especially because I'm Black, obviously, the ones that I really emphasize, I'm going to get to them in a minute. But there are 7 that I feel you need to have. And I'm thinking about this around the world now. These are simple things. Dr. Bill was talking about potassium, and he was surprised that he couldn't find potassium in Kenya, in a clinic in Kenya. Well, it's hard. It's just as bad in Nigeria, if not worse. And what we're finding out is that Black people are deficient in potassium, more deficient in potassium than white people are. The big one here is vitamin D3. That's really the big one. That's why I put it number 1. I'm going to show you a few slides in a few minutes, but vitamin D3, super important for the brain. If you notice, I didn't mention omega-3s. Omega-3s should be here, but from because I'm thinking about supplements now. To make a good omega-3 supplement involves a lot of purification, a lot of just getting it right. I would say over 95% of the omega-3s you find on the shelves simply don't do what they're meant to do. I use a specific brand from Dr. Barry Sears. You've probably heard about him. One of my heroes. He probably has donated more to our foundation than any other person. Omega-3s are important, but it's not included here because it's just that hard to get really good omega-3 supplements, especially in places like Africa. These, on the other hand, are relatively cheaper and relatively available if you will look for them. Obviously, I buy them here and I ship them to Nigeria. So these are 7. I can't go into why they're important, but trust me, they're good. They're all very, very important. Let's talk about vitamin D3. We Black people are the most deficient in vitamin D3 on the planet, unfortunately. But the results of being deficient in vitamin D3 are stunning. All right, vitamin D3, just that one vitamin. And really, I hate the term vitamin because it's not a vitamin. It offers 40% protection against dementia. These are research that they've recently done in Ireland and I think a few European countries. It also protects you from developing full-blown diabetes. Here are some of the revelations. We know that there are receptors for vitamin D throughout the central nervous system and in the hippocampus. It is involved in neurotransmitter synthesis and nerve growth. I can't read what is said here. Let me see. This one you have this thing. Okay. In addition, vitamin D protects neurons and reduces inflammation. Here's another thing. I'm not going to read all this, but for those, so they tested on mice, and I think they've also doing some studies on humans as well. There was a stark reduction in the number and strength of connections between neurons in the hippocampus for those who did not have ample levels of vitamin D. The scientists found that the lower the subjects, and this is important, folks, the scientists found that the lower the subject's vitamin D levels, the more negatively impacted was their performance on a battery of mental tests. Compared with the people with optimum vitamin D3 levels, those in the lowest quartile were more than twice as likely to be cognitive impaired. And it goes on and on and on. Stunning, absolutely stunning. Why isn't everybody talking about this? Why? I mean, if it's true we want to end Alzheimer's disease, and it's in the office here in Baltimore, they have this big sign saying, we dream of a time in which there's no more Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is going to end. Well, why aren't we talking about this? And even when I talk about it, sometimes I have to be careful because it's like, ooh, what are you talking about? I don't get it. All right. Next one is insomnia. It's not just not being able to sleep, but again, we have to use the one that had the letter I. So we got to work with the letter I. It also applies to things like sleep apnea, to maybe getting up at night, falling asleep easily, but getting up at night, maybe at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, or those who have light sleep. And then with sleep tests, they can now see that even those who feel that they've had like a good 7-8 hours of sleep, when they do the sleep test, they find out that the quality of the sleep was really, really low. They didn't do enough REM sleep. They didn't have enough deep sleep. They didn't have non-REM sleep. And then back to vitamin D, we're finding out that vitamin D, higher levels of vitamin D in the blood, vitamin D helps you shift through those different stages of sleep. It's like a cycle. It's like a car. You're driving a car, gear 1, gear 2, gear 3, gear 4, then you slow down, you go back to gear 1. It's vitamin D. Vitamin D is the shifter of sleep in the brain. If your vitamin D is lacking, your sleep too is going to be lacking. But it's not just all about vitamin D. There are other things that you need to do. And what we're finding out is that before dementia, full-blown dementia shows up, for a while, people's sleep had been adversely affected. So that's one of the signs that can lead to dementia is that really, I'm not saying it happens all the time, but sleep altered sleep is one of the problems. Another thing we see among the elderly, it's not as bad among the Black community because we tend to have more of a, I mean, certainly in Africa, we certainly have more of a communal, togetherness as opposed to, shall we say, Caucasians or people of European descent. You tend to be more to yourselves, just me, myself, and I, and my spouse, so to speak. When the kid gets out of the house, kid, we laugh about this a lot. Oh, when the kid is 18, he gets out of the house, he needs to get a job. That never happens now in our country. But anyway, bottom line is isolation. We are now finding out, and this is troubling for me because I've been a loner. I've been a loner for many years, so it's kind of like it's a wake up call for me. But connections matter, not just for financial reward, but for health, our health as well. Let me see. So some of the conclusions, they did a study, they're now studying isolation and its effect on the brain. Combining, let's see, we provide evidence that social isolation contributes to human brain atrophy and cognitive decline. Not among mice, but in actual humans. Atrophy, that's shrinkage of the brain. If you're not having good quality social relationships. Here's another one. The socially isolated have decreased ability to learn and make decisions. When you're socially isolated, you're at greater risk of developing memory problems. Scary stuff. All right. Okay, so the last one I want to talk about is immune dysfunction. The immune system, my goodness, I would say over 20 or 30% of your brain cells are actually immune, some form of immune cell or the other. We know about the microglia, which are the archetypical immune cells in the brain, but there are also other immune cells that are like the astrocytes, for instance. They in some ways they act as protective cells or support cells, glial cells in general. We're now beginning to find out that proper immune function relates to intellectual brain health. And can you imagine that? It's not just about being like a Voltron to protect against viruses and bugs. The immune system in the brain is vital for cognitive development. Vital for cognitive development. So it's really, really important that we understand this. So we've been using, and we've heard of others who have used specific nutrient supplements that specifically target the immune system and improve or optimize immune function. And when that happens, when we use them, we also see at the same time improvement in memory and cognitive function and in thinking and overall mood and emotional health. So it's very important. I wanted to this quick story here. This Israeli professor in Tel Aviv, she was talking about, she's a neuroscientist, but she was studying this whole topic of the immune system. And so she produced a few mice that she knocked out the immune system. So the immune system wasn't working like they should. And she sent them to a lab for testing. And the lab scientist calls back and he says, "Why did you send me these stupid mice? They can't find their way through the maze. They can't do this. They can't do that." She wasn't testing for cognitive function. She was testing for immune function. But it so happened that she found out almost surreptitiously, is that the right word now? Almost accidentally, let's use that. Accidentally, that the immune system is also important in cognitive processing function. Amazing, mind-blowing. All right, so we've looked at the dirty dozen. I just want to mention a few things. Some of you might say, why isn't inflammation one of them? It's isn't it? Yes, and it was one of them. But when I learned about isolation, when I learned about insomnia, I was like, no, we gotta move inflammation out. And quite frankly, inflammation applies to pretty much all of the dirty dozen. It's like the final common pathway for all sorts of problems, from infections to illnesses to injury. Inflammation is present in all those different areas. So I'm putting inflammation as a standalone. That this is not one of the dirty dozen because they all lead to inflammation in some way. Anyway, that's my story. I'm sticking with it. Just want to mention too that the three groups at highest risk, I have a picture here that embodies the three groups: women, blacks, and military veterans. I'll have twice the risk or twice the rate of dementia as the rest of the population, twice the risk of having dementia as the rest of the population. Actually met a lady who was a military veteran who was already having signs of memory loss, who had kidney problems, and who was diabetic. And I'm like, oh, yeah, she's gonna need a lot of handholding. Yeah, she's Black too. Okay, so just want to say a few things about African Americans. Like I said, I really I really reach out. I really have. I feel this is an area that has to be addressed. So we're starting a YouTube channel. We already have a YouTube channel that deals with dementia and brain disorders in general, but we're creating a separate channel for blacks and dementia, because I think that has to be isolated and addressed specifically. And what I've seen is that once we address specific areas, it kind of spills over to other areas as well. Like, for instance, why are blacks having such higher rates of dementia? By the way, it's not just dementia now. We all know diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, cancers, and so on and so forth. We have much higher rates. I don't know what we did. I don't know what sin or offense we committed, but that's what we have to deal with. That's where we are. Those are the cards we've been dealt. So we got to live with it. And we just got to figure out how to deal with it. And it has a lot to do with things like diet, activity levels, education levels, lifestyles. Racial injustice obviously plays a role as well, and so on and so forth. Even disparities in access to the healthcare system, also a factor. We cannot deny that. But some of those factors aren't available. They don't apply in countries like Nigeria, where obviously we're all the same race. So we can't just hone in on those alone. Obviously, there have to be other factors, and I summarize them in these three areas, these three reasons. And like I said, once you understand the most basic things, we see that this applies. Anybody who gets dementia, this applies right here as well. With the three reasons: we have greater attacks. We seem to sustain or suffer greater attacks, assaults on our brains over a period of time for the reasons I've given. We have fewer protections. I give the example of vitamin D. Vitamin D is like a Voltron for the brain. It's a great protector for the brain. And if we're low in vitamin D, which we are, it leaves us more vulnerable to disorders like dementia. And here's a big one. This applies, it's a cultural reason. We're less likely, once we begin to see things, once we begin to notice things going wrong, especially we Black men, especially once we begin to notice things going wrong with our memory or our cognition, we're at least like, we're very, very, we're loath to go to the doctor and to complain of a mental health issue. Not gonna happen. Really, really, really hard. It's also worse in the military. And I'm a military veteran, so I know. My course mates are, my mates are, or former mates are military generals now, major generals. If those of them who have had presented for mental health issues, I mean, it's on their record for the rest of their lives, and it can affect their ascent through the ranks. So most people just know to keep quiet, keep their heads down, and to deal with their issues. All right, I have a few minutes. Let me see how much time do I have left. How much time do I have left, Dr. Bill?
Hang on a sec. Oh, you have 20 minutes or so.
Well, 20 minutes. Oh, cool. All right. I don't think I'll use all that, but because we have to leave time for questions. But thank you.
We have questions and whatnot. So
perfect. All right. So going back to the diagram I showed earlier. Remember, it starts with cellular damage, but really before cellular damage, it starts with attacks. We've talked about the different things that can lead to cellular damage. Dementia's dirty dozen. But number two is the complex brain changes. We didn't really talk about that. So we want to talk about that a little bit before I hand back to Dr. Bill. So the brain is, so this is a picture of the human brain on the left, and on the right, you see what is known as a synapse. This is the most basic, shall we say, unit of the brain for anything to happen, whether you're thinking, whether you're having an emotion, whether you're trying to remember, whether you're trying to move an arm or a finger, whatever, it all happens here. I like to call this is like the analogy is the unit, the nation, any nation is made up of families, family units. If the family units disintegrates, the nation follows. Parents and the children and the child's, that's the best hope for this world. Having loving parents and the childs that they can raise. Obviously, not every we don't have perfect situations, but that is the standard. Once you start destroying the nuclear family, then we are in for some trouble. Same thing. The basic units of the brain is the synapse, but it's not just about the synapse. It's about the network of synapses. Okay. And so what they say is that we have about 100 trillion synapses or connections. I don't know who has the time to try to sit down and count the synapses. But that's what they say. So I'm going to take their word for it. They're the experts. So what happens with Alzheimer's disease? And this isn't well publicized, but Alzheimer's disease specifically targets the synapses. So it shuts down, it pulls back on this. So what's happening in Alzheimer's disease? Let's put it this way. What's happening in Alzheimer's disease? Is this looking at me well? Okay, good. What's happening in Alzheimer's disease is that the brain is pulling back on the synapses, because you got to remember, synapses take a lot of energy. The brain cells, yes, they take a lot of energy for their work, but the synapses themselves, they require a lot of energy to be maintained. So it makes sense for the brain to begin to pull back once it's not having the energy and it's not being able to function the way it should. So it's basically going into hibernation. So it's a tearing down of the connections between the things. So I just have a picture here. And that is really the crux of the matter. So everything we've talked about, dementia's dirty dozen, they all influence the synapses. So when I talk about deficiencies, like we mentioned, hormonal deficiencies, estrogen protects the synapses. So low levels of estrogen means that the synapses are not protected. Obviously, the brain cells themselves have to be protected, but the key is the synapses. So that's why things like education, because if you're learning new stuff, you're making new synapses. If you're sleeping well, you're making new synapses. If you're eating well, you're making new synapses. If you're connecting with people and having great relationships, you are making new synapses. Mm-hmm. If you're falling ill, you're getting diabetic, you're hypertensive, it's damaging your synapses. So it's really all comes down to synapses. So if you're going to prevent, and I got to be careful here because, again, this is we're straying into medical legal territory. But I like to just talk about strengthening the brain. If you're going to strengthen your brain and keep it healthy to your 80s, 90s, and beyond, you've got to think, I got to learn about how to protect, strengthen the synapses, how to improve the synapses. That's really what it comes down to. All right. So prevention. Remove the cause and the effect ceases. This was by a 19th century philosopher. Remove the cause, so we've given you about 12 causes. And depending on where you fall in the whole spectrum, you should find out what to do. If you're hypertensive, if you're diabetic, you got to take your drugs. You got to make sure that your blood sugar and your insulin levels are low. But also there are also natural approaches. And I'm sure you found from coming to these webinars, you probably have been equipped to know what to do where that is concerned. Got to sleep well. You got to, I kind of want to emphasize your vitamin D levels have to be. Now they're saying, so in the US, we measure it in nanograms per mil. The range is 30 to 100. Most doctors, if you're like 32, you're fine. As far as the doctors are concerned, you're fine if you're 32. To me, that's ridiculous. Doctors who are treating dementia, like Dr. Dale Bredesen and others, are now saying that they don't accept anything less than 100. I know a doctor who is a sleep doctor. She's a neurologist. You probably heard of Stasha. Her name is Stasha Gominik or something. She said when she started treating people for sleep problems, it was only when they went above 60 nanograms per mil that she began to see improvements in their sleep. So if the doctor tells you you're 30, 32, you're fine, you got to work hard on that. It's the levels that you need. And vitamin D3, please do not get vitamin D2. Vitamin D2, yes, is what doctors prescribe. That's the prescription-based vitamin D. I got to tell you, it's not as bioavailable, it's not as effective, and there are greater chances for toxicity. And everybody's always shouting, oh, toxic vitamin D. Now, you got to take a lot of vitamin D to get toxic levels. But I would encourage you, if you're taking vitamin D, you want to take vitamin K2, you also want to take magnesium and potassium as well. Those are the supporting cast to make vitamin D more effective and less, and you have less calcium buildup if you take those as well. So I'm just going to say a few things about what we do in our foundation. So when we have people with dementia, we have like a 7-pronged approach. We address several different things, beginning with blood flow. For obvious reason, if the blood flow is compromised, blood flow to the brain is compromised, you really can't get much results. So we address blood flow. We also support the nervous system as a whole. Different ways we do that. We provide immune supports and gastrointestinal. Sorry, how about it? I just noticed I was on mute. I didn't miss too much. Well, we didn't. So speaking about gut support, there's a lot that goes into gut support. They are now actually associating some kinds of dementia with the problems with the gut bacteria. So there's a lot to be talked about there. Detoxification is huge as well. There are actually, as we mentioned earlier, some dementias are due to toxins. Some people just live in very toxic environments. Some have exposed to mycotoxins. They stay in homes where there's a lot of mold. Anyway, all these things we sort of address based on the history and based on what's the circumstances that the patient presents. But I spent most of my life researching for the most powerful, of course, safest, quickest approaches to addressing brain problems. So we do a lot where that's concerned. So I think we're just pretty much, all right, let me just round up with this. The secret of successful aging is a healthy lifestyle, staying physically active, cognitively active, and socially active. Sometimes that is not enough. Unfortunately, there are just some people that are born with maybe bad genes, quote unquote, and even those who live a healthy lifestyle, sometimes, as they say, sometimes bad things happen to good people. But have no fear. There are things that can be done. Always things that can be done. And if you think about what to do to strengthen your brain, if you give the brain, that we found this out. We found this out with kids. We found this out with adults. It's just a question. Your brain has tremendous potential, tremendous ability to fix itself at any age. The challenge is to find out what it needs and how to get what it needs over to it so that it will do the work of fixing itself, of repairing itself, of regulating itself, of restoring itself. If it's done right, our experience is that it's almost miraculous, the recovery that can be gotten once you begin to apply these first principles. So I want to say thank you again for listening. Thank you, Dr. Bill. I will hand it back over to you.
Thank you. Can you go back a couple of slides to your 7 points? Can you back?
Oh, yeah, sure. Hang on, man. Okay.
If you can do that.
Yes, sir.
And maybe this is a topic for maybe another time, but can you elaborate a little bit more on what you do for each one of these? And what is it? I told you, I spent time in rural Africa, and we were just happy to be able to get through the day, and to sort of address this kind of these things would pretty much be impossible. At least this was in 2007. Maybe things are better now. I don't know, but
Mhm.
but when you say you're going to address blood flow, can you give us an example or two of each item? Is that something you could do?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to blood flow, we have a formulation. Again, like I said, I had to each of these things we had to find out from the creators of these nutraceutical formulations. So there's a formulation that helps to boost nitric oxide in the blood, and what we know is that nitric oxide is a gas that helps to dilate the blood vessels, relax the blood vessels, and improve blood flow to the brain and the rest of the body. And we know that you need at least, this is coming from the Nobel Prize winner. You probably heard of him. What's his name now? The guy who, 1998, he won he and two others won a prize for their discovery of nitric oxide and how it works in the body.
First gut.
Is that him?
Yeah, it's First gut. What happened, I know it because I went to the med school where he was in Brooklyn, New York, SUNY Downstate.
Got it. Yeah. That's so he's one of them. The other guy was Louis Ignaro.
Ignaro, right.
Louis Ignaro. Yeah. So you're right. He and Louis Ignaro. So yes, so they so we use a formulation that's based on that. It also has a number of other supplements like vitamin D and vitamin D and the B complex. By the way, B vitamins, I didn't go into that. Huge when it comes to the brain. So brain support, we use a lot of B vitamins, B1, I mentioned B1 thiamine, a lot of research into that. Vitamin B12 as well is very important, very important. We also have some nutraceuticals that actually address the apoptosis. If you can contact me, we can go into that more. But apoptosis is known as programmed cell death. Is the way the body kills its own cells and destroys and gets them out of the system. Especially what is known as the senescent cells, the old cells. So the body, when you're younger, the body is more able to destroy its own cells and get them out of the way if they're not working. But when you're older, it's more difficult to do that. So there are nutrients or nutraceutical supplements that help the body. It improves the body's ability for apoptosis. And by the way, it can either first of all, the body attempts to repair the damaged cells or the defective cells or the senescent cells. Once it sees it cannot do that, it then destroys the cell and gets it out of the way. And that's what you want. You want lazy, dysfunctional cells out of the way, out of the system. So there are nutrients that can do that. Over to hormonal support. We also, like I mentioned, given the raw materials for the body to make and balance out the four main hormones that I think are most important for the brain are the estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and the thyroid hormones. So there are nutrients that can help the body make them in the right balance and restore some of it back to health, rather than giving the fully replacement hormones, because that comes with its own problems, as you know. Immune support. There's a supplement, or it's not a supplement now. It's a nutrient. It's called ace-mannan. There's been a lot of discovery about ace-mannan. It's a polysaccharide. It's a sugar polysaccharide, which the immune cells must have to communicate with each other and to identify problems, including cancer cells. The macrophages, which are like the quarterbacks of the immune system, use ace-mannan to do their work. So there are supplements that have ace-mannan. There are different kinds, but different qualities of supplements. So we do that where that's concerned. But backing up, things like vitamin D and vitamin C and zinc are extremely important for the immune system. they can help with. In fact, what we're doing for the sickle cell disease now is that we're just putting vitamin D, vitamin C, and zinc in one formulation in the right balance and the right. I formulated it and I got coming from India to manufacture it because it's cheaper there, and a charity in the US funded it, so we're sending it all over the country. And believe it or not, we are seeing miracles happening with sickle cell disease. Same thing. Those same three can be used, should be used for anybody who is having dementia as part of the supporting cast to help to support the immune system. Like I said, the ACE-mannan is the nutrient that is probably the most important, but it's usually more expensive, much more expensive. Gut supports, we use probiotics. We also use nutraceuticals that help to repair the gut wall and help to close the gut barrier, so reversing leaky gut, if you will. Detoxification, big thing. So we use zeolites. We use a specific brand of zeolites. I don't know if you've heard about that, Dr. Bill. You probably have. Zeolites help to. They're like tiny cages. They're made from volcanic ash, believe it or not, and they're like tiny magnetic cages in the blood. Once you put them in the body, I use them every night before I go to bed because it helps with detoxification, and the brain detoxifies itself during sleep. So zeolites, they're like magnets. They attract and draw and trap heavy metals like lead and mercury and all that other crap, and also chemicals as well. So it traps them, and you just pee them out in the morning or whenever, and it helps. So those who have been affected by toxins, who ended up having dementia, we use this for them, and we have good results with that. Finally, is the battery. The brain, like I said over and over again, the brain needs a lot of energy. One of the things we try to do is we try to get them to reduce their carb intakes. I mean, that's probably the common sense to do. You want to improve insulin sensitivity, so you want to reduce their carbs. If they can go on a ketogenic diets, of course, that's not going to happen in Africa, where we are not going to go away from our African food, which is very starchy. So we try to reduce their portions. I'm trying to remember what we do for. I know this sounds really strange since I do this all the time. I'm trying to remember the supplements we use to boost brain energy. We do use omega-3s, obviously, but from my experience, if a person has dementia, we just haven't seen omega-3s as effective in turning the ship around. So omega-3s are good as a preventative, but when it comes to the big guns, when it comes to using big guns to address dementia, I just haven't seen them as effective as they should be. So maybe something. What?
B vitamins in terms of the energy.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yes. Absolutely. You're right. B vitamins in the energy. Yes. And there's still something else. I'm just, it's just not getting to me now. But maybe before we end this call, it'll come to me.
Coconut oil is pretty cheap.
Yes. MCT oils. Yes. MCT oils, coconut oils. Yes. That's another one. Another one are the butyrates, by the way, too. The butyrates, they're calling them postbiotics now. So the butyrates, there are some formulations that have butyrates in them that the brain, they're like ketones, so the brain feeds on them as well. And as you know, the brain seems to be more, it has a preferential uptake of ketones as opposed to glucose, if it's given the choice.
Mm-hmm.
So in a nutshell,
right.
Yes, sir.
In terms of the hormonal support, by the way, good lecture, Dr. Ajibade.
Thank you.
In terms of the hormonal support, because I didn't hear you mention pregnenolone, for example. Do you have any experience with that?
So the formulation I use, and I use a couple. No, it's from the wild yam extract. It's got diaspora in it. It's got the diosgenins. Those are the precursors to pregnenolone. So they're like the more natural forms. Then the body makes pregnenolone and then makes progesterone from that. So they are precursors to pregnenolone.
Right, especially in the cases of trauma.
Right.
Yeah,
have you used it?
Yeah, we use pregnenolone quite often. We actually measure it as part of our workup and our routine, and you can get it for pretty inexpensively. You get 100 milligrams. You get 100 of them from Life Extension for about $16. So it's pretty inexpensive.
How much do you use per?
150 to 100 milligrams. It does take a while. It's not patients take it for 2 weeks and they're better. That doesn't happen. But 6 months to a year, and we do see quite a bit of improvement, especially with memory issues. So we've been doing that quite a while, actually.
I see. So our challenge is this: if patients don't see results within 2 weeks or a month, they're out of here. So we have to see results within 2 weeks.
I understand. In our practice, anyway, we addressed that right away. We said, you need to give us 3 to 6 months. I mean, if you expect to be better in 2 weeks, you're in the wrong place. Like most of the folks who show up, at least at my door, are pretty accepting of that. So,
got it. Yeah. Do you have insurance?
No.
No. So they pay out of pocket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did for up until about a year and a half ago, and the insurance people, they just got out of hand. So we just goodbye.
For senescent cells, what do you use to remove them?
Did you say for senescent cells?
That's what it's out of.
Yes, for senescent cells, what do you use to remove them?
So we use a formulation that that addresses apoptosis. So so it depends on the part of the body that is. So for the brain, there's a product called Brain and Nerve that stimulates apoptosis, and then the body now the brain now is empowered to remove the cells themselves. So the supplement does not do the work of removing. It just empowers the brain, or empowers the body to remove them from the brain.
Do you have your own line of supplements that you have available, or you just have these? Are they just compounded? Do you sort of put them together as per person?
Yeah, so per person, I buy them I get them from the different companies, but I'm formulating one. So I'm putting together one. It isn't out yet, so maybe if you're interested, if our audience members are interested, they can maybe we can get a list, and then we'll just put them on our list. So when it's eventually ready, hopefully in the next 1 or 2 months, it'll be out there. So it combines all these different basic things that the brain needs to function. So this, like the basic things like potassium. I'm shocked, quite frankly, that I think I have a potassium supplement here. I got off Amazon. I mean, the highest you can get is like 1,000 milligrams in a capsule. The body needs like 4,700. That's what we're finding out now. Okay, for women it's less, but we need like 4,700 milligrams a day. That's a lot of bananas. So we're trying to putting together a formulation, not 4,700 for potassium, but at least ensuring or trying to ensure that people are not deficient in these different supplements, these different nutrients. And what we know is that most people are deficient in potassium. We mentioned vitamin D, definitely deficient in vitamin B1, thiamine, especially if you're on a high carb diet, which is, if you're on processed foods, you are by definition deficient in thiamine. So we're looking at all these different things. I've kind of put together about close to 20. I don't know how it's going to work. The formulator will have to figure it out for me. It's not going to fix it. I don't think it's going to fit in a capsule. So we're trying to see if we're going to put it in a different formulation. But yeah, we are working on that.
So I don't know. Do you know Dr. Mark Gordon at all? He does traumatic brain injury with hormone optimization. He's got some supplements. He puts them into a pack of say 4. And he divides them up, and so it's 4 different capsules. And I mean, this is not my how I know how to do anything. So, but he'll get the B's and the D and the C. He'll get like 3 or 4. And that'll be, his formula. So instead of trying to put 20 all in one, he kind of splits it up. So, be a way to do it.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I mean, again, I think about it from my perspective. People, my experience that people just, especially from my background, don't like taking supplements. So if we can make it as simple for them as possible and just put it in one place. But you're right. I mean, that might work as well. So we probably experiment and look at the options we have.
Would I be able to get your information from Dr. Clearfield to pass it on to Dr. Lewis, Harshfield, and Carter? Harshfield's involved with the Veterans Administration for us veterans. And Dr. Lewis just did a 6-part Zoom on eyes, and the eyes that have been studied for the past 20, 30, 40 years in relationship to dementia and Alzheimer's. And this gets into iridology and the cataracts and the retinopathy and the macular degeneration. It looks like it can be signs into determining how fast the dementia or the Alzheimer's is going to hit. And I think you two would hit it off, and you'd probably like help explode on the scene.
I love it. I've never heard that before. That's fascinating. Yes, please connect us. Dr. Bill, you're going to give up my information? I mean,
Absolutely. You know, with your permission, of course. But you know,
granted.
And then you'll get a contact list for everybody that's been on the call tonight too. So, okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
There's a couple of questions in the chat. Can I go through them? Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So first, can Wernicke syndrome cause dementia?
It's a type of dementia, and that's I think that's from thiamine deficiency, like I mentioned. It's related to alcohol intake, excess alcohol intake. It looks like dementia, and that's they can go to the emergency room. They come into the emergency room, and the ER doctor knows what they're talking about. Well, they know what they're doing. Sorry, they can fix that right away with the thiamine infusion. So yes.
So that's the rest of the question here. Said, how do you diagnose it? And then is the thiamine in the blood always low? And then the treatment. So you just pretty much answered all of that.
Okay.
Next is, can ozone intravenously help Wernicke syndrome? So,
you know, I've never tried that before. It could. I mean, I've heard all sorts of interesting things with ozone. It could, but. In my experience, if a person has a deficiency, that deficiency has to be addressed. It just makes sense to do so if you know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So thiamine is the answer.
Do you use plasmalogen precursors?
I got folks. I work in Africa. When you start talking about things that are here's what it comes.
So was Dr. Kent Crowley was asked the question. I'm just seeing if he's still on. If he could elaborate a little bit on that. Are you still here, Kent? No. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So just to let you know, if it's anything more than take these pills or this lotion or this pill once in the morning, once at night, or once in the morning, once in the afternoon, once in the evening, anything more complicated than that, we've lost them. I've
been there and done that. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't know what that. Remember, we somebody gave us a lecture on plasmalogens about a year ago, so I'm gonna have to go find that guy again. So,
well, I mean, there's been lots of improvements with platelet enriched plasma and all kinds of things they're doing with plasma. And it's quite impressive stuff. But again,
lots of great talks, eye-opening talks. Conventional wisdom medicine has failed us. Dr. Sun asks, how much vitamin D and other vitamin supplements do you recommend for daily consumption? So,
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
How much vitamin D would you recommend for a daily consumption?
Okay, I want to preface that with saying that I am not giving medical advice.
Don't worry about it. We're all good.
So I recommend that you take nothing less than 10,000 in the winter and 5,000 international units in the summer, provided you're going out in your shorts, your capris, and your tank tops. But if you're not doing that regularly during the summer, then you got to take 10,000 international units. Anything less than that, in my opinion. Now, having said that, there are some people, very few, I might add, who are like very sensitive to vitamin D. So they might freak out when they take 2,000, and then you got to listen to your body. But in general, I recommend nothing less than 10,000. Have you heard of Dr. Michael Holick, Dr. Bill?
No.
Okay, he's one of the. His name is Michael Holick. I think it was over there in Boston or something. He's one of the foremost researchers in vitamin D, and he studied them in Kenya and Africa and all that. And he's like 10,000. Anything less is ridiculous. And he also addresses all the problems. I mean, when all the doctors are always shouting, the first thing you say, they say when they hear you say vitamin D is like toxicity, 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 and they're like, oh, watch out for toxicity. And I'm like, it makes no sense. It just makes no sense to me. Your body makes, if you're white, your body can make up to 15,000 international units in 30 minutes of exposure to the sun. That's normally. For a black person, it might take 6 times or 10 times longer to get that same amount of vitamin D. But the bottom line is that if your body can make 15,000 international units a day, every day, and by the way, what do they call those people? The Baywatch people, lifeguards. Yeah, lifeguards. They found out that lifeguards can make as much as 50,000 international units from being exposed in the sun. If your body makes that much, how can that be toxic? And so it's a tragedy that people do more to fight against vitamin D than they do to promote it. And I really, I need to be careful with my words here, but I fault our medical practitioners in doing this, especially our Black doctors, because Black doctors, we need to be promoting this to the Black community more, because we are very deficient. There's a doctor who wrote a book. Let me get this from you real quick. It's called Patient Practice, Patient-Centered Clinical Care for African Americans. He's based in Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. And they asked him, the faculty asked him to write a book on it, and so on what are the unique. I think initially it was like they wanted him to talk about just the minority health challenges and how to deal with them. But the more he studied, the more he realized that Blacks are a class on their own. We have specific problems. And then he started talking about studying about vitamin D and the problems that happen with the vitamin D deficiency. And while he was studying it, he's like, okay, let me just check. I haven't checked my vitamin D levels in a long time. Let me go check my vitamin D levels. Do you know what his vitamin D levels were? 9 nanograms per mil. Remember, we said the acceptable range is 30 to 100. His was 9.
That's normal. That's normal in January in Wilkes-Barre, PA. That's actually pretty good.
9 is pretty good.
In Wilkes-Barre, PA in January, that's a pretty good level. So, if I can make just a couple of short comments about that. I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago in Houston, and the day before I got, you know what ViewMedi is? It's sort of like the YouTube of for medical people. It's a little video.
Oh, really?
And there was a video by a endocrinology professor at UCSF, basically said that vitamin D is no good for anything. And this is a board certified endocrinologist. And of course, the comments were, we're fooled and we've been told otherwise. And it's he was the guru there. So, if anybody, I have the link somewhere. If anybody wants to watch it, it's kind of ridiculous, but
I would love to, Bill.
but this is what's out there. Having said that, I actually had a patient who overdosed on vitamin D, and he passed away. And this was a long time ago. It was in 1990, 91. You have to remember, back then we didn't measure vitamin D levels. We were taught. So as you can tell by my hair, I've been around a long time. We were taught in school, vitamin D is a poison. Don't ever use it. And that was it. That was the extent of it. And that was, I graduated in 1978.
Oh, wow.
So this guy he was 44 years old. He wasn't in really good shape. He was a bad diabetic. He'd already had two MIs. He had 2 stents in his heart. He had a stent in his carotid. He had a half a foot off from diabetes. A good day, his blood sugar was 300. About a year, one night he shows up, and it was in the middle of the winter in an ice storm. He shows up having seizures, which was brand new. And they call me from the ER, and he's in the ER having seizures, and they're giving him maximum medications, and nothing's working, and they didn't know what was wrong with him. And they did a CAT scan and an MRI and all of that. Everything was normal. The only thing that wasn't normal was his calcium was 15. So, those of us know calcium of 15, that's a brain tumor until you rule out otherwise. Well, he didn't have that. And the neurologist came in. He didn't know what to do with him. The neurosurgeon came in, endocrine. Nobody knew what to do with this guy. I called his wife and I said, we wanted to send him down to down to University of Pennsylvania, but the weather was bad, so we couldn't get him out of there. And she says to me, I don't know if this matters, but he went to Sam's Club 6 months ago, and he bought six bottles of vitamin D. And there's 1,000 pills in each of those bottles. Oh, and last month he went back and he got 3 more, and there's only 1 left.
Oh.
So where we lived in Northeast Pennsylvania, it was kind of a tradition. Mom would put a candy dish at the stairwell, and even though it was coal country, there was a basement, a first floor, and a second floor. And the tradition was when you went up and down the steps, you could take a scoop of candy. So she said, about 6 months ago, he took all the candy out and he put vitamin D pills in there, and he took a scoop of vitamin D every time he went up and down the steps. Well, so I called the lab and I said, can you run a vitamin D level? And you know who runs the labs in those places, right? You remember Statler and Waldorf from the Muppets? Those 2 old curmudgeons, nasty guys, right? So
yeah.
Every 4th or 5th word was an English word that you could repeat. The rest of them were would make a sailor or even a Marine blush. So when we finally got it back, it took a while. We got it back. I got greater than 900. That was the guy's vitamin D. That's as close as they could come. So I figured it was a 2,000 unit pill because he took 88,000 units a day for 6 months. And he died. I mean, obviously he was in bad shape to begin with, but I always remember that. If I had said, "Well, just take what you want," I don't know if there's any defense for that. He says, "Well, you told me to take what I wanted, so I did."
Right.
Took 8,000 pills in 6 months. I mean, that's obviously this guy earned it. Like you said, you have to really overdose yourself. But
yeah, you've got to go out of your way to or really do something silly.
But we've seen blood levels of 130, 140, and the patients have dizziness and ringing in their ears, and they have balance problems and things that I don't know what your experience is, but so
yeah. I thank you for pointing that out. There's a real danger of overdosing or high levels. But my experience is that it's much more on the other end than the overdose aspect. And from 10, almost nobody. I give kids 10,000 international units. Like I said, with sickle cell disease, I mean, we started with 1,000. It didn't work. We moved to 2,000, and then finally it was like, if you're over the age of 6, you're like 10,000. If you're under that, 5,000, and that's really what seems to have worked for us now. So. Maybe with Black people maybe there are those snips that we have to deal with, but I'm pretty comfortable that for the most part 10,000 is okay. And if there's a problem, usually they should be able to sense it, and they should be able to feel maybe I'm a little too sensitive, and they can change that.
In our experience, usually. We get an increase in the vitamin D level of about 8. I think it's nanograms per milliliter. I think that's the unit per 1,000 units intake takes about 60 days. So 2,000 unit vitamin D would increase the blood level by about 16 points. So we usually shoot.
No, say that again, please.
So it's about 8 points, vitamin D, the vitamin D level will increase per 1,000 unit international unit capsule, and a good quality one. So a 2,000 unit, 2,000 IU pill, which is the big bottle at Sam's Club or Costco, should increase it by about 16 points. So 5,000
every month. After a month?
It takes about 2 months, 2 to 3.
Okay.
Okay. 5,000 unit would be 5 times 8 is 40. So about 40 points. So your guy at 9, needs more than that. We've also had some pretty good success with the time released ones, the 50,000 unit time released ones. We've had some pretty good success with that. And then they only have to take it once a week. And the big challenge there is to have them remember to take it. So,
Yeah.
So, but that's kind of been our experience. Our goal is usually about 50 to 80, the midpoint of about 65. So like you said, 30 to 100 is normal. The midpoint is 65. So you know where those numbers come from, right? It's 2 standard deviations. That's where 30 to 100 comes from. So it's 95.4%. So at 65 is the midpoint. Then we take 1 standard deviation, which is 68%. Break that in half. 34% on either side of our 65 gives us a goal there of 50 to 80. So that's how we figured that out. That's what we've
I'd
been
like to add 2 things, Bill.
doing that for a long time that way. It's worked out for us. So I don't know about 100 to 120. I'm a little uncomfortable with that, but you're younger and much better looking and probably have a lot more experience with it. So we can look at getting it a little bit higher. So that's the way we've been doing it anyway.
But you put some magnesium to it also, right, Bill? Magnesium and vitamin K.
Yeah. Yeah.
The vitamin. I was about to say that. Thank you. Vitamin K2. If you, I believe the ratio is 100 to 1. So if you're given 10,000 international units, you give about 100 micrograms of vitamin K2.
Right.
And vitamin K2 will, for the most part, at that ratio, it will negate the calcium toxicity concerns because it pushes, it pushes the calcium, excess calcium in the blood. It pushes it into the bones and teeth where it needs to be. So and since calcium is the main concern with vitamin D toxicity, with vitamin K2, you're pretty much in good shape.
I have an answer for both of you guys. As far as what Bill just asked, in terms of the 50,000 units weekly, what I do with my patients usually, and talking about Black patients, usually they go to services. I told them on Sunday, put it by your Bible. If you're taking your Bible, you're taking your vitamin D also. And I got great results with it, man.
That's great.
To tell you that.
Yeah, actually, we use Sunday also for that. So
Right.
Okay. Okay. Well, there was a question here about is what you're doing similar to the Bredesen protocol?
The Bredesen protocol is for no, it's not. I'm more basic, very much more basic than that. Like I said, we can't measure anything. We can't measure. The Bredesen protocol is very, very detailed in all the different measurements and all that. And sometimes they have insurance coverage, sometimes they don't. But for the most part, their patients are pretty well off. Well, yeah, we don't even come close to it. I just deal with the basics. So like I said, we usually look for the safest things that can give the greatest impact in the shortest possible time. Otherwise we've lost them. And so sometimes we get hits. Sometimes we don't get those results quickly enough. And
when I got to Kenya, they to the Suba District Hospital, they told me the blood count machine was out, but the technician would be there within 3 months. And 9 months later, when I left, I heard him say to my replacement, the blood count machine is out, but the technician will be around in 3 months. Sometimes I forget that's the way it is. You can't get that stuff, there. That it just doesn't exist. So there's a comment here. Zeolite is good, but Pascalite is also very effective. I don't know if you know anything about that.
I have never heard that before, so I will write that down and check it out.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So zeolites, just a quick point. As you know, with like I said, I deal with brain disorders of all ages. One of the most effective things we found out for kids with autism was because they have dysbiosis, they've got chemical metabolites, they've got chemical toxins, they've got heavy metals, they've got a whole bunch of stuff affecting their brains. One of the great tools we have is just by giving zeolites, we found out they could even improve their speech. They were able to speak better just because we were able to take away that burden, that toxic burden from them. So, and we use it for dementias as well.
We have it in the office, Joe, so we'll look at it tomorrow. Okay. So, Dasanitab, I don't know, that's got to be one of those biologics, and quercetin is used for brain senescent cells. That's a comment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, DASATINB. That's one of those. I can never pronounce those biologics. I'm not sure which one that is. So, that's a comment. And Mary Ellen says amphicetin is another one.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, would you have Dr. Nario talk about dasatinib a little bit? Because that's been commonly used and you can use it every 3 months, 6 months. And if he's using that protocol, I would like him, because he's the one who has mentioned that and he's still around. If you can.
Who was that?
On it. Dr. Melvin Nario.
Yeah. He's still here, Dr. Nario? I know. He's in my office. He follows me around every Tuesday.
Okay. All right.
I'll get him. Don't worry.
Okay. Thank you.
Life Extension has senolytic activator. Okay. Dr. Fogarty says she buys her potassium from in bulk. It comes in a powder in a big bag, and she uses a 1/4 teaspoon on salad every night.
That's potassium?
Yep, that's what she said. I don't know how much that is, but I guess it'll say on the bag, right?
I have to figure out how to unmute myself. Yes, I think it's about 600 milligrams, which is, according to my labs, what Dr. Gant recommended for me.
Okay.
Which was way more than I was taking. I was taking a couple of hundred milligrams a day. I thought that was a lot, but obviously not. So to buy it and, take all those, most of it comes in a hard tablet, which is hard for me to swallow. I'm old. So, and swallowing is hard. So the little crystals dissolve in my salad. If I'm not careful about sprinkling it, it can be a little nasty to taste, but mostly I don't even notice it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Which company do you buy it from?
Bulk is the name of the company.
Oh, bulk supplements? That is on Amazon?
Yeah.
On Amazon?
Well, I think they have I think I went directly to the company because sometimes you get better deals that way.
Got it.
And
yeah, I mean, just to put a fine point on potassium, I think one of the mistakes I see with neurologists and people who treat dementia is that they just focus on that brain, that organ called the brain, and we don't look at the supporting cast, like I said, the immune system, or the hormonal system, the endocrine system. With potassium, it's amazing. Without enough potassium, you can't get those synapses working. You can't get the brain use energy. But also importantly, especially for us Black people, you don't, because we lack potassium more. Potassium is important for vasodilation, to improve blood flow and to relax the blood vessels, and for blood flow in the brain. So one of the reasons why we have, as Black people now, we have such intractable blood pressure. Many times we're on multiple medications to address blood pressure. Many times, if you add potassium to your blood pressure medications, and this applies to white people as well, you'll find out that you don't need as much blood pressure medications. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to stop it, but it goes a long way. So I think the potassium is the unsung hero in many of these conditions, in my opinion.
You also won't need as much salt. That's one of the things that happened when I started taking the supplement. I used to crave salt. Well, it wasn't the salt I was craving. It was potassium I was craving.
Interesting. Interesting. That's good. Thank you.
A comment that we all know this in medical school, I was taught vitamin D was lipophilic and there was a high chance of toxic accumulation. I think that was, you probably.
That's what they keep on saying. That's just what they keep on. I mean, it's infuriating.
I know.
It's like they've never encouraged anybody to take vitamin D. They don't check the vitamin D levels. But as soon as someone like me comes and starts talking, I say this because this last Saturday I went to a church. I went to speak to their seniors, and there was a professor of medicine in his 80s, and he sat down next to me because we happen to sit down next to each other. We're from the same school, and the first thing I say, he tells me when I sit down is, you got to explain to them. Make sure you tell them not that vitamin D is toxic. And it's like going on and on. I mean, it's like, did you hear anything else I said? It's like, you got to warn them about vitamin D. It's like vitamin D is the devil.
I know. Like I said, if anybody wants the link for that video, I'll show it to you. This is a endocrinology professor at UCSF, and it was just ridiculous. And this last weekend we're at a dermatology conference here in Reno, and the speaker was talking about vitamin D levels are apparently low with melanomas. So he encourages all his patients, I don't measure them, I just give them 1,000 units, and I don't really know how to dose it at all. But 1,000 units, you won't get into trouble. Right? Did I get that right, Joe?
I agree.
Right?
I agree. I mean, it probably wouldn't do much either, but you won't get in trouble. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's what he said. He didn't deviate. 1,000.
I don't measure it. I don't know how to measure it. I give them 1,000 units. I tell them to be careful if they take 2,000.
Sad.
Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. There's a link here, something from Shell about I think it's an article on calciferol. And there's a study here. Dr. Sun says keeping vitamin D levels above 100 can substantially protect against COVID. Not so sure about that, but we can find out.
Well, the study showed 98.7% of the people who had severe forms of COVID or who died from COVID had low vitamin D levels. That is a fact.
Right. Well, that I think all of us here, we're all the Kool-Aid drinkers here. We're all pretty much in agreement with you here. We're not arguing with you. I don't want you don't get that wrong. So, but like I said, these professors stand up there, and he's the guy who's writing the board questions. And he's telling you to you don't need vitamin D is it's a big waste of time. So yeah. So
well, I Johns Hopkins is like, I mean, if you have a very strong throwing hand, you probably hit Johns Hopkins University from my apartment here. And I gotta tell you, I mean, they are adamantly opposed to anything supplements, vitamin D included, and that's unfortunate.
Okay. Another question here, is there a safer form of vitamin D, plant-based? I'm not sure. I don't know.
So the vitamin D2 is more like the plant-based. It's certainly not as bioavailable as the vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is from the fish oils. That has been shown to be the most effective and the most bioavailable and the least likely to be toxic. So I would say vitamin D from fish is probably the best. No, did I say fish? No, it's not. I'm sorry, that's not true. I'm thinking about omega-3s. Vitamin D, where do they get vitamin D from? I think some from sheepskin and some other areas. But anyway, from animal sources, vitamin D from animal sources is probably more effective.
And some cod liver oil has vitamin D in it and can help raise the vitamin D. And then I'm wondering if what Shell's saying is some of the manufacturers say that their supplements are plant-based, not synthetic-based. That might be what he's talking about. Right?
Yeah, could be. Could be. Very well could be. What I found about it, well, I mean, so my experience with vitamin D, I'm things like omega-3s, I'm very, 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 very fastidious or careful about taking the right brands. But with vitamin D, I mean, we've tried so many different kinds, and again, with kids, it either works or it doesn't work. They don't have all these confounding factors. And from what we've seen with vitamin D, almost every brand works. So I'm not too concerned about the brand, quite frankly. Whether it's from China or the US or whatever, it seems to work okay.
Okay. Is there a way for us to listen to your TV show, or to tap in some way? Is there can we get that on the internet, or is that sort of a proprietary thing?
Oh no, it's quite good. You know what? While we're here, let me just go to, because I have one of our web pages. We have the archived video. I'm just going to post a link here. Give me a second to the thing. Are you asking about live?
Live or recorded, it doesn't matter. So
okay, yeah. Live, you would probably have to watch it if you have cable. I mean, watch it in Nigeria or in Africa, one of the countries in Africa, if you're through the network. So that's a little harder, but definitely I can get.
We could just do our next convention in Africa, Doc.
That's right. That is right. Okay. I think I got it here. Yeah. So I am just gonna post this here. See if I can. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I am posting it here, and I can just, while I'm here, I'll just put my contact information as well. So,
okay.
So that's just one less thing for you to do, Dr. Bill.
Okay, there we go. Okay, all right. So we got the link there if you need it. I have Dr. Am I saying it right? Ajibade.
4 syllables. Ajibade.
Ajibade. Okay. Dr. David's email address there and his phone number. If anybody wants to get in contact with him, we'll be sending you, as soon as we're done here, the email contacts for everybody that was on the call. Any sort of summary wrap up? It's getting late there. We need to let you go. You probably we really appreciate your time and your expertise and the amazing work you're doing. I mean, it's just phenomenal. So
well, thank you so much, and thank you for
all the things we didn't do when I was in Africa. Those 9 months, I thought we did a good job, and all the things we actually didn't get to do. So, almost make me want to go back almost, but I'm getting too old for this. Okay. All right. So there's that. Okay. So again, thank you so much. We'll have the video up as soon as we can. Somehow my web person they're ending up on YouTube too, and I have a YouTube channel, and these are all of our videos are ending up there also. So
nice.
So it's aosrd.org/webinars. That's our usual. That's where we end up. And then if you put in Clearfield Medical Group for the channel, apparently I have a channel. I didn't know I had a channel. I have. Last I looked, 999 subscribers. I don't know how that happened, but I do.
Have a fan club, Bill.
Yeah.
Have a fan club.
Yeah. So Clearfield Medical Group is the channel, and all our web, a lot of it, not all of them, but a lot of our, especially the last 6 months, I think just about every video has been on there. And of course, the one with Dr. McCullough ended up being on there, and I got pulled off. So that's another story.
Oh, really? Dr. Peter McCullough, huh?
Yeah, we've had him. We had him live last year at our conference, and then we've had him on a couple times. YouTube doesn't.
Yeah, he's a lightning rod, isn't he?
He is. Yeah. I think he's looking a little worn out though lately. So
I can't blame him.
Okay.
He is.
So thank you so much. It was great. And can we add you to our email list so you can see what we're doing? And we would love to have you again. We won't be too overburden bearing. We'll we'll keep it light. Okay, but we, just fascinating, really, great work, and we love to have it. Next week, Jay Campbell's going to be back, and he's going to tell us his take on, the peptides have been banned. So he's going to tell us his take on it. And there was an article, he was mentioned in an article last Friday in the Wall Street Journal, if anybody wants to look it up. So, and not in a positive light. So he'll be back with after that. The week after that, I think we have Dr. Patel is going to be enlightening us on her I'm going to say environmentalism, right? Environmental medicine. So that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Okay. We're here every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We've been doing October 22nd was our 3 years of anniversary. We've been doing this for 3 years. We've only missed one Tuesday, and that was because it was on a July 4th, and I decided to take off. But we've been doing this for 3 years now. All of our videos, and all of them are on that aosrd.org. So if you want to find any of them, and if anybody would like to volunteer to catalog them, because they're just in order. So it would be nice if we could get a list, but I don't have the time to do it. So somebody wants to do that, please let me know. Dr. David, thank you again so much. I can't thank you enough. And please come back. Everybody who's still here, thanks a lot. Bring one person next week, and we will double our census. Bring one person. That's all every week I ask them to bring just one person. Can't be that hard. So, okay. Oh yeah, there you go. Hey Pete, there we go. We got Pete. So that's Joel's father. So.
Oh, really?
Okay. Brought one person.
Okay. All right, everybody. Right. I'm going to say good night.
Thanks so much,
David.
Appreciate it. Thank you,
everybody. Good night. Have a great week. And it's at least here on the West Coast, you still have a little Halloween time left. So, okay, we'll see you again next week. And great talk.